My journey towards anti-racism originally started when I was a college student. I read Peggy McIntosh's article, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, which is essentially about power and privilege, white privilege essentially. And it was like my mind was blown, my world was blown essentially. That article provided me with the words and the tools to understand white privilege in a manner in which I needed to really think and do the self-work and self-reflection around it. And so what that caused me to do, that article caused me to think consciously about why could I see myself on covers of magazines? Why could I see people who looked like me in just about any TV channel that I turned to? Why could I go into a shop and not have to worry about being followed when maybe some of my friends of color didn't have that same experience? When I drove my car as a teenager and as a young adult, I didn't have the fear of necessarily learning about how to position my hands on the steering wheel in case I was pulled over. I didn't have to have the talk from my mother about what I needed to do if a police officer pulled me over. And so all of these things began to raise a consciousness level around really interrogating and questioning the assumptions that came with whiteness and the pieces around white identity for me, and how it moved from a personal level then to a social level, to a systems level. And that's what I really think around the idea of the whiteness journey comes from, and how we have it made me think so much as a young college student that, I have to have these conversations. I have to figure this out for myself because it's going to impact other people around me. I think that in terms of not having to have that talk, so not having to have the talk, not having to, not having to have my mother sit me down as a teenager and say, Clint-Michael, this is how you need to react towards police. This is how you need to engage with police so that you can come home alive, right? That was never a conversation in our house. However, it was conversations in many of my friends' house. And so I believe that for me, my white privilege shielded me from that. And at the time, what I remember is that article, the Peggy McIntosh article, exploded all of these ideas onto me and helped me to understand that I now had this awareness. I had to do something with it. And so I believe that we will always continue to have the talk around racism and oppression and power and privilege dynamics until white individuals have a reckoning with ourselves, until we do the work around looking at how our whiteness impacts the communities that we come from, how our whiteness impacts systems, how our whiteness impacts the structures and systemic levels of society. And we have to be able to do that because, as Maya Angelou says, she once said, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. And so the reality of that is that I am so grateful for all of those change makers, all of the revolutionaries, all of the folks who have come before me, who have fought and done everything humanly possible to help us reimagine ourselves into a more just and equitable world. And so therefore I have the opportunity, but I also have the responsibility to continue to help lean into the discomfort, to continue to help other white individuals understand whiteness, to kind of get our people, right? I need to get my people, and have the conversations around, we owe it to each other, and we owe it to society to have the conversations around whiteness and to be uncomfortable and to sit with the discomfort and to understand how identity has permeated into systems that have driven into inequity. And so I think that until we get a real reckoning and until we center ourselves around the concept that we have the opportunity and the responsibility, we will continue to have this conversation. The summer filled with pain and trauma from communities across this country. What it caused for me was a realization that, this has been happening always, right? This has been happening always. It's just now getting filmed on cell phones, right? But this has been nothing new. But what it centered was the pain and the trauma. And it was an epidemic. We are living in two global pandemics right now. We're dealing with a pandemic of COVID-19, but we're dealing with a pandemic of systemic racism, oppression, white supremacy, anti-Blackness. And so what that did for me, seeing the faces, seeing the pain, seeing the outrage and the anger, was that it continued to center the notion of humanity, and that we have the opportunity in this moment to reclaim our humanity as people. And we have the power to not diminish another person's humanity, because that's a choice. Each action that we make is a choice. And so choosing to believe it's an either or, either you are supportive of the police or you are supportive of Black Lives Matter, that diminishes humanity, right? We have to understand that it has to be a both and. It has to be a situation where we can see both and that we have to understand there is a better way. There is a better way to provide uplift. There is a better way to support and affirm humanity and hold accountability to the people that are in charge of protecting and serving us. And the reality is that nothing happens until we put our feet to the fire. And when I say I'm talking about white individuals, right? I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about those white individuals with me. We have to put our feet to the fire to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable with doing the work, which means we have to have the tough conversations. We have to read the books. It's not a person of color's responsibility to teach me about their pain. It's not a person of color's responsibility to tell me about their lived experience or their reality. That perpetuates trauma. What it is where the responsibility lies is with me. In terms of making changes, sustainable changes, it's easy to do something that is in the moment. It's easy to do something that we can put on social media and feel good about. It's easy to do performative allyship. It takes little to no effort. We can show up for a photo op. We can claim we've done something, and then we go home, and that's it. But that's performative. The truth of the matter is, what we have to do to make sustainable change is to listen to the needs of the communities that are being most impacted, center their voices, allow them to tell us what they need, allow them to be a part of the mobilization, the planning, the implementation, the processes. And we have to understand that we can't work from a place of ego. We can't work from a place of ego, because what that does is it will interfere, it'll trip us up, it'll suspend the efforts that we're trying to do. The other thing that we have to do, and we have to have a real clear sense about, is working to make sure that we all see ourselves in each other's common humanity. That my humanity is tied to yours. Your humanity is tied to mine. And so our connection has to be there with each other. We have to see that. If we see that we think that this work is only the responsibility of diversity and inclusion centers, we failed. Just like if we think the work of mental health is only the responsibility of counseling and psychological services, we failed. If we think that the work of accessibility is only the responsibility of disability support services, we failed. We have to see each other in all of these pieces. The truth is, this work will never be done. This work is always going to be on a continuum. The work around anti-racism initiatives and racial justice will always be something that has to be kept in the forefront of everything that we do, because this work will never stop. We will never get to a place and say, we've made it. We will never arrive, right, to that place. We're always going to be in a process of becoming, because there is so much intersectionality. There is so much diversity that we were always going to have to be learning and growing and causing ourselves to stretch. And so because of the stretch, because of the growth that is needed, because of the ability to stay agile and pivot, we will never be done with this work, and we should never want to be done with this work.